Cool. We're going to get started.
So I guess we're all fellow birds, right? That's what this is about? Birds of a feather?
We AI birds here?
I guess so.
Cybernetic birds. Some people believe birds aren't real. So we gave a couple talks, one on enriching experiences in the metaverse with AI. And we just gave another talk on multitask machine learning and its applications to the metaverse. But this is more of just a general, discussion about AI in the metaverse, its implications, its applications, its concerns, its advancements, its flourishments. And so we'd like to open it up to, to a discussion and any questions and anything. If you'd like to give us or if you want us to give a bit of a background, we can do so as well. But I think we've met a lot of you, so.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So my name is John Daly. I'm co-founder and director of solutions architecture at AI Squared. We're a startup as of about 2 years.
Yeah, about 2 years.
2 years. And we specialize in multitask machine learning and integrating that into integrating augmentation into workflows. So across the workflows across the web, augmenting those with AI. Facilitating AI to be run in the browser, injecting inference into websites and 3D environments as well. And my background traditionally was in spatial computing. I've worked a lot in augmented reality and virtual reality. I have a couple patents in blockchain-based permissioned remote authoring of 3D content geospatially across AR clouds. And so I've worked with some AI models in synthetic generation of 3D environments as it pertains to localizing devices during different times of the day. So if you have one map of an environment, it is maps during one particular time of day that has certain lighting and certain shadows. And I was working on research in how to augment that map to look like it is in different scenarios, whether that be rain, fog, snow, nighttime, things like that.
And my name's Jacob Wren, so I'm the CTO and also co-founder of AI Squared. My background is much more in the AI space. I like to say I'm the AI guy at the company. Metaverse, AR, VR is less my specialty, so it's been really cool to be here and see all the different ideas and things floating around in this space as well. Like I said before, I'm the founder or co-founder and also created the Beyond ML project, which is the multitask machine learning talk was about. So with that, love to start answering questions and starting this discussion.
Sure.
I just have a general question, might be a little entertaining. So you guys work in the AI space, there's a lot of discussions about AI ethics. Mm-hmm. And now we're talking about Metaverse. Do you think we should also talk about Metaverse ethics? Because obviously this kind of technology's got double-edged sword, right? It can do good and it can do evil as well. So
yeah.
What do you guys think?
No, for sure. I'm a huge nerd on that topic. I'm actually working on some underlying infrastructure to, prevent some of that, some of the applications of AI from going wrong. And I think that a lot of the dangers of that can be mitigated by data security and data privacy practices, whether that be through regulation, clear privacy policy and guidelines and enforcement of those guidelines. I think that there needs to be stronger penalties for companies for breaching certain regulations and even their own privacy policies and whatnot. Because right now it's not really, it's still financially tenable to do surveillance capitalism and collect information and breach it repetitively because the fines are a drop in the bucket to what they make from actually doing that. And so I think that a lot of the concerns that we have with AI as it pertains to Web 2 right now are, we're still behind on even approaching that. And I'm really worried going into Web 3 in that a lot of that is going to be compounded and made exponentially worse with the metaverse. And because we're surrounded by information, we're surrounded by immersive experiences that are AI influenced. And so I think it's really vital to have those conversations. That's why we're here. I'm always of the thought that, you can limit AI by what you feed it. So if you can control access to data and the distribution of data and what you can do with the data, especially once that access has been given, right? Current digital rights management kind of ends at access. And so I'm really interested into diving into monitoring what is done with the data and how do you provide data provenance on the actions that are done with that data and how it's transformed and how inference is performed by that data. And so I'm really interested in blockchain to that end, but I see a lot of limitations in that implementation. I'm really interested in decentralized IDs and self-sovereign identity to identify content, AI agents that are going to be existing in the metaverse, because it's really important to know when you're interacting with an AI. You can be easily influenced by a bot nowadays, and also providing provenance on content across the network. Deepfakes are a huge issue right now. And it doesn't even have to be AI-generated content. It can just be high-fidelity graphics are fooling people. There were some news stations that posted clips from a video game and passed them off as footage from the Ukraine war. And so it's a mess, and it's only going to get worse. And the good news is there are people already talking about this. There are already initiatives put in place that are working on underlying tech. The Content Authenticity Initiative is one such place that this is happening. Adobe founded that, and it's grown to, I think Microsoft is working on it. They just announced that they're integrating with camera manufacturers so that protocols are put on the hardware so that you can monitor what images are actually genuine images, whether they're genuine photons being captured in the image and not generated by AI and things like that. And so the trouble with current deepfake tracking and monitoring, though, is that you're using AI to track an AI. And GANs are a thing, and GANs are generative adversarial networks. GANs are general adversarial networks, and the whole point of a GAN is to use an AI to trick an AI, basically. And so it's a cat and mouse game, and I think that there needs to be better infrastructure in place, which is something that I'm working on as a side project, that basically applies metadata to the content and it travels with it across the network, which is something that the Content Authenticity Initiative is also working on. And so I think that as we rethink Web3 and we rethink the metaverse, we need to be talking about that plumbing. It's not just about interoperability, but I mean, it definitely is that, but it's also, rethinking even just structures that aren't there to begin with. And so I love having those conversations.
Okay, you're hitting right into my sweet spot here.
Okay.
I have to admit it. One of the groups I work with is SPX, or Software Package Data Exchange, and we're busy looking at AIs and bill of materials, and then training data, having a data profile, an AI profile to start capturing some of this information. Is some of this info that you're interested in, are there other places that we should try to gather in so we can come up with a set of metadata that we're all going to agree on to share?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and let me repeat it back to you. So basically, are there any other standards in terms of metadata and attribution that we should be looking at?
Because you say you're interested in the area, so like I say, I'm quite happy to pull you into the discussions we're having, but I was wondering if there's more places, because we've got IEEE pulled in already.
Yes, so the Content Authenticity Initiative is branched off basically the research and development group called the C2PA, I think it is. Yeah, I'm getting nods. And so that is started by Microsoft, I think Adobe, I think Synthesia is in there somewhere. TruePic is one company that's working on the hardware attribution, and they're using current photo standards in terms of current JPEG and PNG metadata standards to basically wrap metadata protocols around each other. So, but yeah, I'd love to continue that conversation.
Keep the conversation going then. The other question I had is there's a lot of, since you're interested in multitasking and so forth, there's a lot of processing that's happening in the constrained devices that's coming in as input and is being filtered as input. What's your sort of take on some of that, and what sort of guardrails are you thinking we're going to need to put in place?
Yeah. So.
Like I'm thinking motion sensors,
Yeah.
actuators, and things like that, so you're interacting with the environment properly.
Yeah, I mean, so only until recently, there have been a couple of protocols or standards put in place in IoT devices. Prior to, I want to say maybe like 2000, I don't remember when it came out, maybe 2017, 2018. The standards for IoT devices were all over the place. Everybody was using their proprietary system basically, and it was a mess. I think that there needs to be more sort of a intermediate language that they use. The Spatial Web Foundation is working on one such language. It's called, I believe, HSML, Hyperspace Markup Language, and they're created a new protocol called Hyperspace Transaction Protocol, which basically classifies a lot of what we're talking about in the metaverse into a lexicon of different concepts. So we have like channels of where content might exist or be authored. That a channel could be a virtual world, or it could be an application, or it could be sort of a subset of data that exists within certain attributes. It has assets. It has agents and credentialers. I think credentialing is something that is going to be incredibly necessary and is going to have to travel with metadata, because if you lose a credential, you're kind of out of luck in a lot of scenarios. We're seeing that with access to NFTs and things like that. So I would say that the spatial web has thought a lot about IoT in that regard, and how it's going to interface with everything else and be consumed by AI. And so they developed a language to that end that can be communicated across AI and
Well, what about
blockchain.
AI at the very edge points? Like TensorFlow Lite type of processing on the IoT devices. Have you
Sure.
seen some of that interface in?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good use for that type of AI as well. I mean, it depends on really what's being collected, what's being stored, like all those types of things. So obviously AI at the edge, it reduces the need for sending all of that data back to a centralized location. So you can, if you're looking for one specific thing, you can just say if you found that specific thing and things like that. So, privacy, more anonymity, and things like that can be improved, but then obviously there's the double-edged sword too, as hey, we could also just send everything back as well, or we have better annotations, better labels for a lot of different things. So it's really just like any other technology.
There's constrained communication though, because not all this stuff is wired up, right?
That's
So you're
true,
going wireless and you're trying to filter out what's really important to send up, and some of the AIs will help with filtering effectively.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also could be a double-edged sword in that, if you're not going through some sort of, could be decentralized platform or system of verifying that how you're using the data is being performed in a kosher way. And instead, the data is consumed by an AI on an edge device, and that whatever decision is made happens on that device as well. There's no extra loop of verification or anything like that. Then that can also be something that is tricky to identify, such as facial recognition on cameras and things like that. So.
I saw a hand over here, maybe.
So, in the context of SPDX, one of the sort of standards initiatives you should keep an eye on is this new working group at IETF that's been formed for securing supply chain integrity. Skit, yeah.
Okay, fine.
I'm one of the BoF proponents, supporters, and then, Microsoft and MITRE and others are looking at, what are the structures that we can put in place to basically compress some of the problems that are arising as SBOM formats are multiplying and everyone's realizing, okay, we better start signing these things. And each of these things has a different sort of structure into it. And so if you're a software vendor in the space and you've got, stable diffusion model, you've got this other model over here, you've got these, software components that are part of this assembly, each of them might have some different sort of structure that you're trying to maintain the integrity of these components as they move through the supply chain. So SCIT is attempting to create a series of standards around an input and an output format to that are compatible with ledger systems. And that ledger is, really hand-wavy here intentionally because there's cases where you might want that to be entirely confidential. And then there's cases where you might want it to be partially confidential, those kinds of things. But one other standard that I would say is relevant to this is if you've got something that's pretty complex and that's domain specific that you're trying to protect, you might have spent a lot of time describing this thing in terms of data structure. And that's the kind of thing that the verifiable credential standard at W3C can really help you define, because it's got a semantic data model behind it. You can be as namespace specific and precise as you want to be. There's a lot of industry ontologies you can tap into. So if you're interested in representing chemical molecules in a very precise way, you can do that in a machine-readable way so that every system that processes some piece of chemical molecule will understand that chemical molecule the same way. So I think, keep an eye on SCIT for some application in the AI sort of supply chain security space, and then maybe think about verifiable credentials also. I think verifiable credentials are more relevant in some of these cases where we're talking about kind of complex objects in the metaverse that have, maybe the object was made by an AI, but it's fairly complicated and its structure needs to be preserved as it moves from one system to another.
Yeah, totally. And one thing that we kind of started working on, and it's kind of been on the back burner for a little while, is how to apply sort of ledger technology or verifiable credentials to that data pipeline. As you're filling data sets, you're gathering data sets to train models, it's very important to make sure that provenance is in place. And but also, how does that apply to regular software as well? If we're going to be interfacing AI with software, making sure that the AI is choosing software that is sound and doesn't have a whole lot of known exploits is going to be crucial. And so having a bill of materials that runs through that data pipeline and that software pipeline is going to be, I think, synergistic as we deploy these AI models and have them be decisive agents in the metaverse. So.
I'll put a plug in that I think it should be public by now. In Dublin, I was giving a talk on the subject of extending it to the AI model. So I think I definitely want to continue the conversation. And certainly keep up. I'm working with Bob Martin as well on this stuff, so we can make sure that this gets approaches are harmonized.
Yeah, that'd be great. When is your talk?
It was.
Oh, it was.
September.
Okay.
So it should be up on YouTube now.
Okay, great, awesome.
Look for that.
How about we switch? Sorry. This thing needs battery. The other half of the topic here, feeding the content in Metaverse with AI. I thought, sure we want to worry about bad things could happen, but let's imagine what good things could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we touched on this a little bit with the talk that we gave. The entire world in the metaverse is going to be digital. So there's unprecedented kind of opportunity to train off of that, but also to create that, right? The output of models is some type of prediction, right? So we can create models that can be used to help create that world. We're already seeing some of those things with Stable Diffusion, with other models, GPT-3 based models that take your text or your speech and generate a world or generate renderings of that world. And that's going to be really important because for the most part, when the metaverse comes online, it's going to be relatively empty, right? So being able to not just interact with that world, but to create that world is going to be important as well. And then another one that we talked about, populating that world with AI agents and those types of things is going to be important, but also helping guide people through the world. You can create tutorials and those kind of initial things, but what if somebody gets stuck somewhere that only 2 people have been to before, and we don't really know how to get through there, or how to interact with a certain type of environment, or we can create agents that kind of like Siri or other types of AIs and bots can help you understand what's around you. I mean, accessibility as well. What if somebody is blind or deaf? We can use existing speech to text models for people who are deaf to
Okay, so in your first area, you were talking about using a sort of AI as a tool for helping the creator, designer to finish their job quicker. Is that the type of AI you're talking about, or you're thinking creating artificial world or some kind?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I'm super excited about is utilizing like maybe a chain of different new AIs that are coming out, or new models that are coming out, like Stable Diffusion, like NeRFs and things like that. Facebook just, or Meta just, I'm still not used to that. I probably will never be. But they just came out with a video version of Stable Diffusion, where you can input text and it will come out with a video. And so I'm super excited to see that applied to books, where you can basically just input a book and see what different permutations of what that book's narrative might come out as, like a video or even a synthetic environment. And so in one of our slides, I included an example where somebody inputted the exact text of the description of Galadriel from The Lord of the Rings. And it rendered, basically how maybe Tolkien would have thought that character to look based on his description. And so I'm really excited about being able to generate, I don't know if we'll get there, but maybe even entire video games with logic and things just by dictating to an AI. We're definitely close to being able to, there's a couple companies actually that spoke at, I think, South by Southwest that are working on AI as it pertains to content, I guess you can call it content creation of CGI. Computer graphics, enhancements of movies and things like that. To really help with that pipeline, because that's part of the reason why some movies take 3 years to make now.
So I guess you can at least create the background, right? Some creator may still want to design the layout of this room, but the walls and lighting and those things seems like it can be automated.
Yeah. And you can also automate, I saw examples of electricity, and now with NeRFs,
Right.
you can probably also automate, with some added work, the creation of, 3D characters and whatnot as well. So you'll be able to
Prompt to GLTF.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And I mean, just think about some of the worlds that require, or like their aesthetic is so eclectic, like Star Wars, and that I feel like I would have a hard time coming up with all the different permutations of different species of aliens and things like that, and not only the species but how they look, what they're wearing, what their sort of niche accessories and environments are. But an AI would have no problem doing that, and so it really will enhance creativity to that end. I think the only reason not the only reason, but one of the main reasons why we've been focused on, maybe the problematic aspect of it is because there's going to be such a saturation of content that filtering that content, content moderation is going to be important, but also, what are the implications of if you can do anything, what should you be limited, what infrastructure should we put in place so that you can.
Yeah, I saw one of the
those roadblocks are.
One of the well, we turn to bad things again. But one of the things is influence, like basically, product placement, right? But you can really manipulate people really easily in the immersive environment. You are very vulnerable to be manipulated.
Yeah.
And so I guess there are some simple labeling. People are thinking like, I should be able to tell that is a what's the word of things or something that just, it's not a natural person. Should it be, should it be obvious, like, some visual indication, immediately you should be able to know, like they should declare themselves, right?
Yeah, but it's tricky because, there might be certain art exhibits or projects where the whole point is to try and figure out
exactly
whether or not it is an AI.
So that sounds like a simple idea, but it's not actually.
Right, yeah. And so I don't pretend to have nearly all the answers.
Like I said, we are all some way, even natural person are some way aided by another technology behind me anyway.
Yeah.
And so how much of that is really real? It's very hard to tell in the degree we're thinking about it.
And when we talk about infrastructure, it's one of the largest challenges is, when you want to limit something, you might limit it in a deterministic way in terms of like if it hits A, block it with B or something like that. But there are so many murky situations where that can't be applied, and so I'm wondering how much of the infrastructure of the metaverse is going to have some sort of human in the loop. Right. Whether that be some sort of, maybe that's a DAO, or maybe it's some other content moderator or something. But
that's I think a lot of times that even in the identity world, I chair a task force within Trust of IP, also working on these problems. But my task force focuses on Metaverse and AI, and we immediately say, well, what do you mean by identity in this world? It's very different from a identifier, even keys, anything like that, because once you have AI, you can turn symbols into meanings, and therefore we're talking about in very different layers, right? And so in the higher layer, your identity is really whatever the system can observe you. And the system can observe you, not just the system, but all the other players can observe you too. And so you naturally have a identity in their mind, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And that kind of identity is very, very different from most people. They talk about a ID, a string or something like that. So that's also another area I thought is really useful. And how do we get to visual indication in the world so that we feel safe and can actually act on that?
Yeah, no, totally. And there's an infinite number of external identities that you might have, identities that people project onto you versus identity that you project out.
Yeah.
And we're never going to be able to satiate everybody in terms of like how they prefer to be identified and everything like that. But it's really important to have that balance of the intent of the creator of the universe that you're in, and the intent of the user within that universe. Of like, I want to carry assets across different environments and different games and things like that, but maybe I'm going to an environment where that's not the point of it. The point of it is that you're going to be immersed in a certain story, a certain aesthetic, and so. I personally think that there's going to be sort of a public space and a private space in that sense. Of the public space will be more like VR chat. It'll be more like eclectic and Wild West, and you can be anything and anything and everything. And but then you might go into a portal, and you might go into a very immersive experience like Call of Duty or a fantasy land or something like that. And so I think Facebook is trying to reproduce this with Horizon Worlds, but I think that there needs to be an open, sort of utility space where different open 3D worlds almost act as websites, and that's the public aspect of that. We all have like our home page where anybody that comes in can be anything, but then when we go to very intentful environments, then obviously there's going to be limitations that you're going to run into.
Right. So could it be people procuring that environment, moderators, and this problem?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, follow up on that assistant, AI-powered assistant question. Do you think that interface will be more visual and audio, or how that you guys like? What's the current state of our?
Yeah. So with that type of interface, especially in an immersive environment, you don't want to kind of break that immersion. Have to type something or something like that, obviously. But taking contextual information about what you're physically looking at, that's going to be important, right? Because if I ask, what's this, it's going to want to know what you're looking at. It's not going to say, oh, point to it or something like that. That's going to break immersion a little bit as well. But yeah, looking at different modalities, different input streams is going to be really, really interesting and important. Building those types of applications. Interacting with your voice, interacting with gestures and things like that is going to be kind of the new way we kind of interact within the metaverse, right? So we should build our AI tools to use that type of input as well.
And I think it depends on the medium, right?
Yeah.
Voice to text dictation exists. I never use it because I like the precision of typing. And so there might be situations where, or maybe you want to be sort of private, like maybe you're on a train or something and you want to perform work where, well, you're not going to be speaking into your AR glasses. You're going to maybe want to be, typing something with gestures on the seat next to you or something like that. And so, it's going to be, I'm sure it's going to happen. It already is to some extent, but it's going to be wacky when we're all wearing glasses and we're all, sort of just like waving our hands, like just like dead behind the eyes to everybody else around us, and waving our hands and.
Well, it's similar to like I remember when Bluetooth headsets started really becoming a thing, and you're like walking down the street and it's like, hey buddy, how you doing? What's going on here? And they're talking, and now that's super common. It's almost most, maybe not most, but a lot of people have some type of earbuds in all the time. So it's obviously there's going to be an evolution and a change, and different people are going to want to do different things, right? So,
and it'll be really interesting to see what sort of social stigmas arise from that. I remember when Google Glass holes were a thing, but also if you're wearing glasses. How do you signal to people that maybe you don't want to interact with them, or maybe that you are ready to interact with them? When I walk around a grocery store and I see somebody wearing their AirPods, I think, they probably don't want to talk to me or something. So how do we include those? Either how do we embed sort of affordances to that? Facebook has lights of when they're going to be, lights on their camera of when they're recording. I don't know if that's going to be totally effective because you can put tape over it, but things of that nature.
So you mentioned Google Glasses, and I remember this exact same thing happened, and now when I go to privacy or security conferences, there's people who have on their badges, it's like an indicator. It means like, do not include me in any camera, anything. I'm not consenting to that. So it raises an interesting question and a great opportunity for AI. What about automatic anonymization, automatic blurring and filtering for people who haven't explicitly consented? In the mixed reality world, that seems like the best place to start. Why don't I start by assuming that I can't record you?
Yeah.
And then I'll come to you and I'll say, hey, like, by the way, I'm like plugged into Cool Kids World 3. You want to be in? You want to be part of it? Because I can make you a part of it in 2 seconds, but I actually have to get your consent
right.
in order to unblur you. And right now, you're just an amorphous blur to the people who are laughing at me as I explain this to you, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, it seems like there are going to be applications of AI processing to this immersion that can be basically first-class armor and shields around privacy and security concerns. And if we don't build it in at the beginning, there's going to be a new version of Glasshole for Metaverse people. And we don't want that.
Gotcha. I am getting the red card, so we're going to have to end. But I'd love to continue these conversations with people. Especially that consent question is very important. That's something that I was working on with remote authoring in terms of, how do we make sure that if I own a piece of property, I own the digital layers on top of it. So people can't just author whatever they want within my living room, things like that. So I'd love to continue this conversation with people. We'll be at the mixer. So please feel free to come up, and we thank you all.
Thank you.